A can of formula sat still on the checkout conveyor belt. Just one can of formula. But the entire evening of a young mother seemed to hang in the balance with it. Aaliyah Carter stood there, holding her 11-month-old daughter in her arms, her eyes fixed on the number on the screen. She had counted her money 3 times before leaving home. She knew she was short, but she still hoped. The kind of hope of someone who has nothing else left to hold on to. Behind her, a man in a gray suit stood quietly watching, holding the hand of his 6-year-old daughter. He did not know her name. He only knew one thing. The way she clutched the can of formula in her hand. The way she lowered her head when she was forced to give it back. It looked exactly like something he had been trying to forget for the past 3 years. A decision was made in just a few seconds. But it would pull 2 strangers into a truth no one in that supermarket that night could have imagined. Everything began at an ordinary supermarket in Atlanta on an ordinary Thursday evening like any other. Before the story truly begins, leave a comment. Tell me what you think that man will do next. Do not forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you can follow this story with me all the way to the end. Now, let us return to that evening. No one noticed her. Under the cold white fluorescent lights of the Kroger on Cascade Avenue, Aaliyah Carter stood in the checkout line, one arm holding Maya, the other clutching an old leather wallet, faded from years of use. 29 years old, 3 years working the night shift as a janitor in a 40-story office building in downtown Atlanta, she was used to carrying the whole world on her shoulders without a word of complaint. Maya, her daughter, was nearly 11 months old, with the same large round eyes as her mother and a smile that could soften an entire room. But the little girl had an unusually sensitive digestive system. The pediatrician had instructed that only one special kind of hydrolyzed formula would keep her from spitting up, crying through the night. At $14 an hour, every can of formula was an expense she had to calculate like a debt. She had counted the money in her wallet 3 times before leaving the apartment that afternoon. She knew she would be short, but people still hope, even when all the evidence says otherwise. Aaliyah hoped for a sale she had forgotten about, a coupon still tucked somewhere in the pocket of her coat. Her cart held only the bare essentials, the cheapest oatmeal, a bag of frozen vegetables, 2 jars of baby food for Maya, and the blue can of formula the doctor had said was required. The cashier, a young man named Tyrell, scanned each item through the machine, the beeps steady, cold, as though the machine itself did not care who was standing in front of it. The total was $37.52. Aaliyah's hand trembled as she opened her wallet. She counted $29. "I am sorry," she said, her voice catching. "I have to leave one item behind." She pushed the can of formula back toward Tyrell, trying not to look him directly in the eyes. Behind her, an older woman sighed, pushed her cart a little farther away, the metal wheels grinding against the floor like a wordless judgment. Her cheeks burned, her throat tightened. She wished the polished floor beneath her feet could split open and swallow her right then. A few steps away, pretending to browse the shelf of organic juices, Darius Whitfield stood quietly watching. No one in the supermarket knew who he was. In a simple but finely tailored wool coat, Darius looked like an ordinary father out shopping. But he was the founder of Ironbridge Logistics, the transportation coordination software company he had built from a 1-bedroom apartment 12 years earlier, now valued at more than $3 billion. 41 years old, widowed for 3 years, Darius was one of the few black entrepreneurs on the list of American tech billionaires, though he did everything he could to stay away from press cameras. He was there only because his daughter Nia, 6 years old, had insisted on the organic apple juice sold only at this Kroger. Nia looked at him with pleading eyes. "I want to come with you." And Darius, who had built an entire technology empire but was powerless against the wishes of his daughter, agreed at once. He had watched Aaliyah for a few minutes before she reached the checkout, noticed the way she looked at each item as though doing a calculation in her head, the way she held Maya close to her chest, as though holding her child tight was the only way to keep herself standing. Darius had seen poverty before, of course. He signed charity checks worth millions of dollars every year. But those were always numbers on spreadsheets. He had never stood this close, never seen shame plainly written on the face of a mother forced to choose between her own hunger and the needs of her child. "Dad," Nia whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "Why is she sad?" Darius looked down at the innocent face of his daughter. How could he explain to a 6-year-old the unfairness of the world, that some mothers had to choose between feeding themselves and buying the exact formula their child needed? "She is just having a difficult evening, sweetheart," he said, his voice soft and low. He watched Aaliyah pay for the remaining groceries. Her shoulders slumped, carrying the single plastic bag, her head lowered as she walked toward the exit, moving like a shadow trying to become invisible in a world already accustomed to looking past her. In that moment, Darius Whitfield, a man who could buy anything he wanted, made a decision. He would not let this woman disappear into the night without anyone knowing. He did not fully understand why. He only knew, with a strange certainty in his chest, that he had to do something. He knelt down to Nia's eye level. "Sweetheart, I need you to stand here with Uncle Reggie for a little while," he said, nodding toward the store security guard. Nia nodded, obediently taking the hand of the guard. Darius returned to the checkout with a clear purpose. He picked up the can of formula Aaliyah had left behind, went down a few more aisles, chose a still warm rotisserie chicken, a bag of fresh apples, a loaf of bread, a box of Nia's favorite cookies. He paid in cash, stepped out into the cold darkness, his eyes scanning the parking lot for the young woman carrying the weight of the whole world on her shoulders. He found her at the bus stop at the far end of the parking lot, sitting on the cold metal bench, the small grocery bag at her feet, her gaze far away. She looked so small in the vast, dark parking lot. He approached, his steps gentle, not wanting to frighten her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice softer than he had intended. Aaliyah, startled, looked up, her eyes widening with caution when she saw a tall man, neatly dressed, holding 2 bags of groceries in front of her. Her first thought was that he had come from the store, that she had done something wrong. "I think you forgot this," Darius said, holding out the bag with the can of formula inside. Aaliyah looked at the formula, then back at his face. A new wave of shame washed over her. I did not forget it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I could not afford it." "I know," Darius replied, his voice still warm. "So I bought it for you." Aaliyah went still. No words came out. Aaliyah looked at the man in front of her, searching for some sign of pity, the condescending look she had grown far too familiar with. But she did not see it. She saw only genuine concern, without judgment. "I cannot accept that," she said at last, her pride rising like a shield, the only thing she still had left to hold on to that evening. "Please," Darius said, his voice earnest. "It is only formula. Your daughter should have it." His eyes moved to the small pink diaper bag beside her feet. "You have a baby, right?" Aaliyah nodded, her throat tightening. "Her name is Maya." "Beautiful name," Darius said, a small, genuine smile passing across his face. "I have a daughter, too. Her name is Nia, 6 years old." He held the grocery bag toward her again. "Please, think of this as a gift, from one parent to another." Aaliyah hesitated. Her pride fought against the fierce protective love she had for her daughter. Maya needed that formula. It was not really a choice. Her eyes filling with tears, she reached out and took the bag. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to," Darius said. "But it is cold. The bus may still be a long time coming. I would be happy to drive you home. My car is parked right over there." He pointed toward a dark gray car, understated but clearly expensive, parked nearby, the driver waiting beside the door. Aaliyah was stunned. The can of formula was one thing. Sitting in a car worth more than 5 years of her income was something else entirely. "Oh no, I cannot," she said, shaking her head. "The bus will be here soon. I insist," Darius said, his voice gentle but firm. "It is dark. Let me help you with the bags." Before she could protest again, he bent down and picked up the other grocery bag. His fingers brushed lightly against her hand, a strange warmth running up her arm. She looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time, and saw behind the expensive coat the tired lines around kind eyes, a deep hidden sadness his gentle smile could not completely conceal. It felt like a dream. She let him lead her to the car. The driver opened the rear door. Inside was an entirely different world, quiet, warm, the smell of leather mixed with the faint scent of wealth, comforting and unsettling at the same time. Darius collected Nia from the security guard. The little girl climbed into the car, looking at Aaliyah with curious eyes. "Nia, this is Miss Carter," Darius said. "She and her daughter will be going home with us." "Hello," Nia said, her voice small, shy. "Hello," Aaliyah replied, a genuine smile finally appearing on her lips. The drive to Aaliyah's apartment complex was mostly quiet, but not awkward. Darius asked for the address. She gave it, shame rising inside her as she pictured her aging building in a neighborhood he had probably never driven through. But Darius did not react. He simply gave the address to the driver, then gently played a guessing game with Nia. Aaliyah watched the father and daughter, saw the deep love between them, something beautiful to witness. But she still saw the loneliness in Darius's eyes, a loneliness she recognized because she carried it every day too. When the car stopped in front of her building, a 3-story brick block with cracked concrete steps, Darius insisted on carrying the groceries all the way to her door. "You have already helped so much," Aaliyah protested weakly. "I can manage. I am sure you can," he said with a small smile. "But I want to help." He followed her up 2 flights of stairs. The hallway was dim under a flickering light bulb, the air carrying the faint smell of old carpet, cooked food, completely different from the quiet, clean interior of his car. When they reached the apartment at the end of the hallway, she searched her bag for her keys, her hand still trembling slightly, painfully aware of the peeling paint on the door, the worn welcome mat. At last she opened the door, and a happy gurgle came from the playpen in the corner of the small living room. Maya, who had been watched by the neighbor, stood up and looked toward her mother, her face lighting up. "Mama," the little girl babbled. Aaliyah's heart seemed to melt. All the shame and embarrassment of the evening disappeared. She swept her daughter into her arms, burying her face in Maya's soft hair. She was home. She was safe. That was all that mattered. She turned toward Darius, who stood in the doorway, his expression thoughtful and difficult to read. "This is Maya," Aaliyah said, her voice gentle. Darius smiled, a real smile that completely transformed his face. "She is perfect," he said. His eyes moved around the small, cramped apartment, sparsely furnished, but spotless in every corner. A few family photographs sat on the bookshelf, beside a stack of children's books borrowed from the library. He saw a home filled with love, despite the lack of material things. Standing in the doorway of a stranger's modest apartment, Darius felt a genuine human connection, something he had not felt in a very long time. This was not just a random act of kindness. This was something larger. He handed the grocery bags back to her. "It was very nice to meet you, Aaliyah," he said, using her name for the first time. "Thank you again," she said, her voice filled with pure gratitude that touched him more deeply than any lavish praise. "You have no idea what this means to me." "I think I understand," he said, looking directly into her eyes. In that brief meeting of their eyes, a quiet understanding passed between them, bridging the vast distance between their 2 worlds. Then he left, walked down the dark stairs, and stepped out into the cool night air. As the car pulled away from the curb, a strange feeling blossomed in his chest. It felt like hope. He did not yet know. The chance meeting that night was not an ending. It was the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives in ways no one could imagine. The days after the encounter at Kroger felt different to Aaliyah. The gray cloud of despair that had been her constant companion seemed to have lifted, if only a little. In its place was a warmth that did not come entirely from the kindness she had received, but from a simple truth: someone had seen her. In a world that made her feel invisible, a stranger had looked at her and seen a human being, a mother worthy of a moment of kindness. That evening, after putting Maya to sleep, Aaliyah sat in the small living room, making herself a cup of tea. The can of formula sat on the kitchen counter, silent proof of the strange evening that had just passed. The man was named Darius. His daughter was named Nia. That was all she knew. Perhaps she would never see him again, a brief light passing across the dark sea of her life. But his action had done more than meet Maya's immediate need. It awakened in Aaliyah a spark of hope she thought had gone out long ago. For months, she had been trapped in the cycle of survival. Wake up, get Maya ready, take her to daycare, work an 8-hour janitorial shift, pick her up, cook, clean, sleep, then repeat. Never anything extra, no room for dreams. But now, a new thought began to take root. Fragile, but still there. She deserved more than this. Maya deserved more than this. She thought of her great-grandfather, Sergeant Isaiah Carter, who had once fought for a country that promised opportunity for all, even while treating him with cruel discrimination. She had a photograph of him on the bookshelf, a young man in a crisp uniform, determination in his eyes. What would he think of her now, struggling day by day, too afraid to dare to hope? The next morning, Aaliyah woke with a new determination. While Maya napped, she did not turn on the television to numb her exhaustion as she usually did. Instead, she sat down at the small, wobbly kitchen table with a pen and a sheet of paper. She wrote down her skills. Hardworking. Reliable. Good at communicating with others. Before she had Maya, she had completed 2 years of an accounting program at Atlanta Technical College, her grades always among the highest in the class. She loved numbers, loved the way they always balanced, always had a correct answer if you were patient enough to find it. But when she became pregnant with Maya, the cost of school combined with work and being unable to manage both had forced her to leave. She opened the local newspaper, circling job listings. She searched for work through the unreliable Wi-Fi at the coffee shop downstairs. Most jobs required a degree she did not have, or experience she had never had the chance to build. The familiar wave of discouragement crept in. But this time, Aaliyah pushed it back. She would not give up. Meanwhile, across the city, in a minimalist mansion overlooking the Atlanta skyline, Darius Whitfield also found it difficult to forget the encounter at Kroger. His life was a carefully arranged world of boardrooms, funding rounds, tense negotiations. A world full of privilege, but also full of isolation. His wife, Camille, had died 3 years earlier after a long battle with cancer, leaving a void no success or fortune could fill. Nia was his anchor, his reason to keep going. But after Camille died, Darius threw himself into work as a way to escape the pain, because at the office he knew exactly what to do, while at home, the silence was still too large to face alone. The daily work of raising his child gradually shifted entirely to the team of nannies. Not because he did not love her, but because being busy was an easier shelter than grief. He was a father, but sometimes he felt more like a chief executive, approving schedules instead of truly being present. The image of Aaliyah at the supermarket remained etched in his mind. Her quiet self-respect, the pride in her eyes, even when she was forced to make an impossible choice. The immense love she had for her daughter, so strong it almost seemed to exist as a living thing inside her small, spotless apartment. He had felt more human in 10 minutes in the hallway outside her apartment than in 3 straight years of sterile boardrooms, empty charity galas. He found himself thinking about her throughout the day. During an online meeting, he looked out the window, wondering whether she had found work yet. A strange, persistent need to know for certain that she was all right. This was new for him. He was a man who solved problems with logic and investment capital, not by personally involving himself in the lives of strangers. But Aaliyah did not feel like a stranger. He felt as though he had seen a part of her soul, resonating with an unmet longing deep within his own. That evening, while putting Nia to bed, he stayed beside her longer than usual, listening as she told him about her day at kindergarten, about the picture she had drawn of a purple elephant. He realized how many evenings like this he had missed, buried in work while the most precious moments passed right in front of him. "Dad," Nia said as he turned off the light, "is Aaliyah okay?" The innocent question from his daughter tightened Darius's chest. "I think she will be okay, sweetheart," he said, "and I think I want to help her a little more." He did not know exactly how, but he knew, deep inside, that the chance encounter was not something he could simply let pass without acting. What he did not yet know was that, when he began looking into the woman named Aaliyah Carter, he would discover a truth that would completely change the way he understood a debt he had never known his family carried. Darius sat in the corner office at Ironbridge Logistics headquarters, his fingers tapping lightly on the glass desktop, his eyes looking out at the Atlanta skyline, glittering with evening lights. A week had passed since the night at Kroger, but he still could not get Aaliyah out of his mind. He wanted to help her, but knew he had to be careful. He had seen the pride in her eyes. The last thing he wanted was to make her feel like a charity case. Simply giving her money would be an insult to her inner strength. He did something he rarely did. He asked the head of corporate security, a former FBI agent named Marcus Reed, to quietly learn a little more about Aaliyah Carter, not a full investigation, only basic information. He told himself it was just unfinished business that needed closure, but deep inside, he knew it was something more. 2 days later, Marcus placed a thin file on the large glass desk in front of Darius. "This is the information about Aaliyah Carter that you requested, sir," Marcus said, his voice calm. Darius opened the file, a strange sense of anticipation rising in him. Inside were a few pages. Her address, work history, no criminal record. Everything was ordinary. Then he saw it. A short paragraph about her family. She was the great-granddaughter of Sergeant Isaiah Carter. Darius held his breath. He knew that name. His great-grandfather, Corporal Henry Whitfield, had served in the same infantry division during World War I, the 92nd Infantry Division, nicknamed the Buffalo Soldiers, one of two all-black infantry divisions mobilized during the war, fighting on the brutal Italian front in the final months. Henry had spoken the name Isaiah Carter with deep respect. Isaiah Carter was a legend in the unit, the man who had single-handedly saved an entire platoon during a fierce battle near the Serchio Valley, a battle official history had almost forgotten. Henry was one of the soldiers saved that day and carried that debt of gratitude for the rest of his life. Darius leaned back in his chair, his thoughts spinning. This was not a coincidence. It felt like a message from the past, a connecting thread stretching across generations, binding his family to hers. And now he had happened to meet the great-granddaughter of that hero, a young woman struggling to make ends meet at a supermarket checkout. The vague desire to help her now crystallized into a firm determination. This was no longer a random act of kindness. This was about legacy, about honor, about repaying a debt his family had carried for more than 70 years. But how? He could not show up at her door with a check that would diminish the memory of the shared sacrifice between their two great-grandfathers. He needed to help her while still respecting her dignity, giving her a foothold, not charity, an opportunity, not an obligation that bound her. He spent the entire evening lost in thought, canceled the afternoon meetings, ignored the chime of emails. He looked at the photograph on his desk, of himself and Nia in the park, both of their faces bright with happiness. He thought about the kind of person he wanted to be in the eyes of his daughter. He did not want to be only a name on a building or a face in a business magazine. He wanted to be someone who honored the past and invested in the future. At the same time, in the small apartment, Aaliyah continued her daily battle. She had submitted 7 job applications in the past week. 3 never responded. 2 rejected her because she lacked a formal degree. 1 required a shift that conflicted with daycare hours. Only 1 remained unanswered, an administrative assistant position at a center supporting veterans and low-income working families in the West End neighborhood called the Ashworth Center. Every evening after putting Maya to sleep, she still spent time researching the position, reading about the mission of the center, about the programs they ran. Something about this work felt far more meaningful to her than the janitorial job she was doing, though she did not look down on her current work at all. She reminded herself that manual labor did not define the value of a person, even if the world sometimes seemed determined to say otherwise. She thought about her great-grandfather Isaiah, the soldier who fought for a country that did not always treat him fairly, but still chose to serve with extraordinary honor. If working at the Ashworth Center was a way for her to carry forward even a part of that spirit, she wanted to seize the opportunity with both hands. 3 days later, Marcus returned to the office of Darius with an update. Miss Carter just applied for an administrative assistant position at the Ashworth Center, Marcus reported. That is the center the Whitfield Family Foundation has funded for many years. Darius sat up straight, a spark flashing in his eyes. This was exactly the door he had been looking for. Not a direct check, but a real opportunity, a path she could walk through by her own ability, while still being supported by a structure he could quietly build behind her. But he knew he had to be even more careful. If she knew the position was connected to him, she might refuse it immediately because of her pride. This opportunity had to come entirely from her own ability, not pity. He called the executive director of the Ashworth Center, a woman named Evelyn Brooks, with whom he had worked for many years through grants. But this time, he did not call to talk about Aaliyah. He called to lay the foundation for something much larger, a new program that would create opportunities not just for one person, but for many families like Aaliyah's, descendants of veterans who had sacrificed much but received too little in return. "Evelyn," he said, his voice calm and clear, "I need you to help me establish a new program." Evelyn Brooks had run the Ashworth Center for 15 years. At 52, she had a sharp instinct for people, an ability to see beyond appearances and recognize the real value inside every applicant who walked through the doors of the center. When Darius Whitfield called to propose a new program, she listened carefully, her pen tapping lightly against a notepad. I want to establish a scholarship and vocational training fund, Darius explained over the phone. For direct descendants of local veterans, especially those who served in units that were historically subjected to discrimination, heroes who never received the recognition they deserved. The program will provide tuition, childcare support during study, and a monthly living stipend. That sounds very generous, Evelyn said. But Mr. Whitfield, I have to ask directly. Does this have anything to do with Aaliyah Carter, who just applied for a job with us? Darius was silent for a moment, surprised by her perceptiveness. Yes, he admitted. But I do not want her to receive anything she does not deserve. I want the selection process to be completely fair, based on clear criteria, open to everyone who qualifies. If she earns it, I want it to be because of her own ability, not because of me. Evelyn considered his words for a long moment. All right, she finally said. But you have to promise me one thing. She will never know you are the person behind it, at least not right now. And the process must be absolutely transparent. No exceptions, no shortcuts. That is exactly what I want, Darius replied. A few weeks later, the program officially launched under the name Carter Whitfield Legacy Scholarship Fund, although at first the public knew it only by the simpler name, the Ashworth Opportunity Program, so the personal connection behind it would not be revealed. The program provided full scholarships for vocational training courses and community education, along with childcare support and a monthly living stipend for direct descendants of veterans living in the Atlanta metropolitan area with income below a certain threshold. When Evelyn interviewed Aaliyah for the administrative assistant position, she quickly realized the position had been filled by someone else a week earlier, an unfortunate coincidence. But instead of letting Aaliyah leave empty-handed, Evelyn introduced her to the new scholarship program. You have previous education in accounting? Evelyn asked, looking over the application of Aaliyah. I studied for 2 years at Atlanta Technical College, Aaliyah replied, trying to keep her voice calm even though her heart was racing. I had to leave when I became pregnant with my daughter. Our new program may be able to help you finish that degree, Evelyn said. But you have to apply like every other applicant, through a rigorous review process, including an essay, interviews, and verification of both financial need and previous academic performance. Aaliyah nodded firmly. I am willing to do whatever is required. The application process lasted nearly a month. Aaliyah wrote and rewrote her essay many times, telling the story of her journey, of Maya, of her great-grandfather Isaiah, of her desire to build a better life not only for herself, but for her daughter. She went through 2 rounds of interviews with an independent panel of 3 members, none of whom knew about the connection between her and Darius Whitfield. She submitted her old transcripts from Atlanta Technical College, showing a nearly perfect grade point average during the 2 years she had studied before leaving. She submitted a letter of recommendation from her janitorial shift supervisor, who confirmed her hard work and reliability throughout 3 years on the job without a single unjustified absence. The results were announced on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The phone of Aaliyah rang while she was feeding Maya lunch. Miss Carter. The voice of Evelyn came through the phone, warm and full of excitement. I am very happy to tell you. The review committee has selected you as one of the first participants in the Ashworth Opportunity Program. Aaliyah had to sit down, her hand trembling as she gripped the phone. Really? She asked, her voice catching. Really? Evelyn confirmed. The program will cover your full tuition so you can complete your accounting degree, along with childcare support during class hours and a monthly living stipend sufficient for you to reduce your janitorial hours if you want. Tears rolled down the cheeks of Aaliyah. This was not pity. This was a real opportunity, an opportunity she had earned through her own ability and persistence. Who is funding this program? She asked, unable to contain her curiosity. The primary donor wants to remain anonymous, Evelyn replied, choosing each word carefully. But he believes you deserve this opportunity, based entirely on your record and your potential. After hanging up, Aaliyah held Maya close, tears and laughter mixing together. She thought of her great-grandfather Isaiah, thought of the kind man at the supermarket whom she would probably never see again. She had no idea those 2 men, one long gone, one still quietly watching from a distance, were connected far more closely than she could imagine. Across the city, when Marcus reported the news back to Darius, a rare, genuine smile appeared on his lips. This was not his victory. This was the victory of Aaliyah, earned with her own hands and her own mind. But the road ahead for Aaliyah would not be easy. Balancing the night janitorial job, caring for Maya, and now evening accounting classes would demand extraordinary endurance. There would be nights when she was so exhausted she wanted to quit, but she had something she had never had before, an open door, and she was determined to walk through it, no matter how difficult the road became. The first month of the program was the most difficult period of the adult life of Aaliyah, harder even than the nights she had to count every loose coin in her wallet. The new schedule began at 6 in the morning. She woke Maya, fed her breakfast, took her to the program-funded daycare near the Ashworth Center. From 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, she studied accounting through a combination of in-person and online classes at Atlanta Technical College, where she had left her studies 2 years earlier. At 3 in the afternoon, she picked up Maya, prepared dinner, played with her, put her to sleep. At 6 in the evening, she went back to work the janitorial shift, finishing at 2 in the morning. By the time she returned home, she slept for less than 4 hours before the cycle began again. The monthly living stipend from the program was enough for her to buy an old car, saving travel time between daycare, school, and work, time she could not afford to lose. There were nights when she sat in the small break room for the cleaning staff, trying to force accounting formulas into her head while her eyes kept closing from exhaustion. Numbers that had once come easily to her now blurred together, unfamiliar after a 3-year interruption. One evening in October, after receiving the grade on her cost accounting midterm, AC that left her deeply disappointed, Aaliyah sat in her old car outside the school parking lot, sobbing. She felt as though she was failing, not only herself but also the person who had believed in her enough to give her this opportunity, even though she did not know who that person was. She almost called Evelyn to withdraw from the program. But then she thought of Maya, sleeping soundly at home while the neighbor watched her. She thought of the photograph of her great-grandfather Isaiah on the bookshelf, his steady eyes looking straight into the camera nearly 80 years earlier. He had not given up when facing artillery fire and racial prejudice on a distant battlefield. She would not give up because of one difficult exam. She wiped away her tears, started the car, and drove home. That evening, after Maya was fast asleep, she opened her study materials again, studying until 3 in the morning, even though she knew she had only a few hours before the new day began again. The story of Aaliyah was not a rare exception. According to figures published by the Center for American Progress based on the annual population survey, single mothers in the United States have a poverty rate of around 28%, 5 to 6 times higher than families with both parents present, and for Black single mothers, that figure is even higher, reaching around 30%. Along with that, the cost of infant care at child care centers in the United States can consume more than 40% of the average income of a single mother, a burden that makes working and studying at the same time nearly impossible for many women like Aaliyah. That is exactly why the childcare support in the Ashworth Opportunity Program mattered so much, not merely as an extra benefit, but as the key opening a door that without it, most mothers like Aaliyah would never have the chance to walk through, no matter how talented or determined they were. Gradually, things got better. Aaliyah found her own rhythm. She formed a study group with 2 other participants in the program, James, who was training to be an electrician, and Destiny, who was studying nursing. The 3 took turns watching the children, sharing notes, encouraging one another through long, exhausting nights. The grades of Aaliyah began to improve. She regained confidence with the numbers she had once loved. Her financial accounting professor described her final paper as one of the best in the class. Maya also thrived in the new daycare environment, learning her first words, taking her first unsteady steps. Every time Aaliyah came to pick her up, seeing the little girl run out and wrap her arms around her legs, all the exhaustion of the day seemed to disappear. She still often thought about the anonymous donor. In her mind, he was a kind older man, perhaps a former veteran. She wrote a heartfelt thank you letter, sent it through Evelyn, hoping it would reach him, wanting him to know his gift was not being wasted. She never connected this anonymous benefactor with the kind man from the Kroger supermarket that evening. That memory was kept in a separate corner of her heart, unrelated to her new reality. 3 months after receiving the scholarship, Aaliyah received a call from Evelyn Brooks. "Aaliyah, dear, I have a small favor to ask," the center director said, her voice warm and slightly persuasive. "We are going to hold a small ceremony next Friday evening. It is the official launch ceremony for the program and a chance to thank the donors who helped build it. As one of the first participants, it would mean a great deal if you could attend and perhaps say a few words, just a few minutes, about what this program has meant for you and Maya." The stomach of Aaliyah tightened immediately. Public speaking was the greatest fear of her life. "Oh, Miss Evelyn, I do not know," she stammered. "I am not good at things like that. I would not know what to say." "Just speak from your heart, dear," Evelyn encouraged. "You are living proof of why this program matters, and our primary donor will also be there. He is a very private man, but this time he has agreed to appear. I believe he will be deeply moved to hear your story directly." The mention of the donor changed everything. This was her chance, perhaps her only chance, to thank him in person. The thought frightened her, but she knew she had to do it. "All right, Miss Evelyn," she said, taking a deep breath. "I will come." The entire week before the ceremony passed in a whirlwind of anxiety. Aaliyah wrote and rewrote her short speech a dozen times, but the words never felt right. She finally chose a simple dark blue dress bought from the clearance section, the first new piece of clothing she had bought for herself in years. On Friday evening, she left Maya with the trusted neighbor, then drove her old car to the Ashworth Center. The ceremony was held in the main hall, simply decorated with white tablecloths and small bouquets of flowers, bringing together local community leaders, veterans, and their families. Aaliyah felt completely out of place, clutching her small handbag, her palms sweating, her eyes scanning the room for a familiar face. Then she saw him. He stood on the other side of the room, talking with a city council member. The dark suit was perfectly tailored, but he still wore the thoughtful, attentive expression she remembered so clearly. It was Darius, the man from the supermarket. Her heart skipped hard, an uninvited mixture of shock and nervous excitement. What was he doing here? He must have felt her eyes on him because he turned his head, their gazes meeting across the crowded room. A flash of recognition crossed his face, followed by a slow, gentle smile. He excused himself from the conversation, walking toward her. With every step he took closer, the mind of Aaliyah spun. Pieces she had not even known existed began fitting together with dizzying speed. A primary donor who wanted to remain anonymous. A private man who rarely appeared in public. A program with a name almost matching her family name. It could not be. The thought was too absurd, too much like a fairy tale. "Aaliyah," he said when he reached her, his voice still as warm as she remembered. "Darius," she breathed, her voice almost soundless. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same question," he said, his smile widening slightly. "Though I think I can guess now." At that moment, Evelyn Brooks hurried over to them, her face bright. "Oh, I see you two have already met," she said. "Aaliyah, this is Darius Whitfield. He is the person we have been talking about, the man who founded the Ashworth Opportunity Program." The world seemed to tilt beneath the feet of Aaliyah. She looked at Darius, her mouth slightly open but no words coming out. It was him. The man who had bought back the can of formula for her was also the man who had given her a future. All this time, it had been him. "You," she finally managed to whisper, her eyes wide with disbelief. The expression of Darius softened, seeing the storm of emotion rolling across her face, shock, confusion, and a deep gratitude. "Perhaps we should step outside for a moment," he suggested gently. "It is quieter out there." He led her through a side door into the small courtyard behind the building. The cool night air brought a pleasant sense of relief, the music and conversation from the ceremony drifting faintly through the door left open. "I do not understand," Aaliyah said, her voice still trembling. "Why did you do all of this?" Darius leaned against the brick wall, both hands in his trouser pockets. He looked up at the star-filled sky before turning his gaze back to her. "It is complicated, Aaliyah. But it began a long time ago, before either of us was born." For the rest of that evening, he told her the story. About his great-grandfather, Corporal Henry Whitfield, who had served in the same division as her great-grandfather, Sergeant Isaiah Carter. He told her about the 92nd Infantry Division, the Buffalo Soldiers, the black soldiers who fought for a country that still discriminated against them even while they wore its uniform. He told her about the battle near the Sergio Valley, where Isaiah Carter had single-handedly saved an entire platoon from a deadly ambush. "My great-grandfather never forgot that day," Darius said, his voice low, full of emotion. "He spent the rest of his life carrying a debt of gratitude he could never repay. He taught my father taught me, that we have a responsibility to honor those who came before us. When I saw you at the supermarket, I had no idea who you were. I only saw a mother who needed help. But when I learned you were the great-granddaughter of Isaiah Carter, I understood immediately that it was not a coincidence. It was a chance for my family to finally honor the debt we have carried to yours." Aaliyah listened, completely absorbed. His story erased every feeling of shame or obligation inside her. This was not pity. This was something sacred, a bond forged in the fire of war, an echo of courage crossing decades to touch her life today. "All my life, I only heard stories about him," Aaliyah said, her voice thick with tears that had not yet fallen. "He was only a photograph on the bookshelf, a legend. You made him real to me. Thank you. You are the one building that legacy now, Aaliyah," Darius said, his voice sincere. "You are taking this opportunity, building a future for you and Maya. That is the greatest way you could honor him." A comfortable silence settled over them. For the first time, Aaliyah no longer felt intimidated by him. She did not see a billionaire. She saw the great-grandson of Henry Whitfield, a man trying to honor the past of his family. And he did not see a charity case. He saw the great-granddaughter of Isaiah Carter, a strong, resilient woman with the fire of determination in her eyes. "I should go back inside," Aaliyah finally said, taking a deep breath. "I think I have to give my speech." The thought now frightened her in a new way. "You will do well," Darius said, his eyes encouraging. "Just speak from your heart. That is all anyone needs to hear." He was right. When Aaliyah stood at the podium a few minutes later, looking out at the small crowd, she did not see a room full of strangers. She saw the legacy of her great-grandfather. She saw the future of Maya. And in the front row, she saw Darius, his eyes carrying a calm, steady support, giving her the strength she needed. The prepared speech, the one she had spent all week agonizing over and revising, seemed to dissolve from her mind. The carefully chosen words, the thoroughly rehearsed sentences all evaporated, leaving only the raw, unpolished truth of her journey. She took a deep, trembling breath, then began to speak. She did not speak as a scholarship recipient. She spoke as a mother. She told them about the crushing weight of trying to raise a child alone. She told them about the shame she had felt at the supermarket that evening, when she was forced to choose between the needs of her daughter and the little money in her wallet. She spoke about her great-grandfather, not as a distant hero in a history book, but as a man whose legacy of courage she tried to live up to every day, even in her darkest moments. "This scholarship," she said, her eyes finding Darius in the crowd, "is not just financial support. It is a message. It says that we are seen. It says that the sacrifices of our fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers have never been forgotten. It says that their legacy is not just a name carved on a stone, but lives on in the opportunities we give their descendants." She ended with simple words. "Thank you for giving my daughter a future, and thank you for giving me back my hope." When she stepped away from the podium, the room was silent for a moment. Then warm and sincere applause rose around her. A few elderly veterans wiped their eyes. When Aaliyah returned to her seat, her legs trembling like jelly, many people in the crowd reached out to shake her hand, pat her shoulder, thank her for her honesty. For the first time, she did not feel like an outsider. She felt that she belonged here. Darius was waiting for her, his eyes bright with an emotion she could not quite identify. It looked like pride. "I told you that you would do well," he whispered, for her ears alone. Across the room, Vanessa Harrington, 44 years old, a longtime member of the center board, and also a longtime close friend of Camille, the late wife of Darius, watched this exchange with a cold gaze. She saw the way Darius looked at Aaliyah with a warmth and admiration she had not seen him show anyone since Camille died. She saw the genuine respect Aaliyah had just received from the community leaders in the room. In the carefully arranged world of Vanessa, where status and wealth were the only currencies that held value, Aaliyah Carter was an anomaly, a disruption difficult to accept. And Vanessa was not someone who tolerated disruption easily. In the weeks that followed, a subtle but poisonous campaign began to spread quietly. Vanessa, a master of internal political maneuvering, began planting seeds of doubt in the minds of other members of the center board. She never attacked Aaliyah directly. Her method was far more subtle. During a budget review meeting, she sighed and said, "I am just a little concerned about the oversight of this new Ashworth grant. It appears that a large amount of money is being given to one individual based on a special personal relationship. She approached other members in the hallways, her voice lowered as though sharing a secret. It is a beautiful story, of course, but we need to be careful about public perception. We do not want the public to think that our donations are being used to favor personal friends of donors. The implication was clear and cruel. Aaliyah was not a deserving scholarship recipient, but the object of the pity of Darius, Whitfield, or worse, his personal affection. She was a gold digger who had manipulated a lonely billionaire. And Darius, in his grief over the death of his wife, was using the charitable funds of the center to pursue her. The story was cruel, distorted, and deeply damaging. Evelyn Brooks, who had always strongly defended Aaliyah and the scholarship program, tried to stop these rumors before they could spread. But the influence of Vanessa on the board was too great. In the end, Evelyn had no choice but to call a formal board meeting to review the scholarship allocation process and the future of the program. She called Aaliyah on the evening before the meeting, her voice heavy with worry. "I am so sorry, Aaliyah," she said. "Vanessa Harrington is questioning the transparency of the program. She is trying to suspend the scholarship pending a review. I am afraid she may succeed." A cold feeling spread through the body of Aaliyah. The new life she had carefully built one brick at a time felt as though it was about to collapse. The shame and humiliation from the accusations of Vanessa struck her almost physically. But then another emotion rose to oppose the fear. A hot, fierce anger. This was not only about her. Vanessa was tarnishing the name of her great-grandfather. She was trying to destroy a program that could help countless other families like hers. The Aaliyah of a few months earlier might have collapsed under this pressure. But the Aaliyah of now, the woman who had found her own voice again, would not back down without a fight. "When is the meeting?" she asked, her voice unexpectedly steady. The next afternoon, Aaliyah walked into the boardroom of the Ashworth Center, her back straight, her head held high even though she was trembling violently inside. Every eye turned toward her the moment she walked through the door. Vanessa sat at the head of the long table, her face briefly showing surprise and displeasure at the appearance of Aaliyah. Darius was there too, seated at the far end of the table, his expression tense and serious. Vanessa opened the meeting, her voice smooth and professional. She spoke about fiduciary responsibility, about donor trust, about the need for transparent procedures that could not be questioned. She never directly mentioned the name of Aaliyah, but everyone in the room understood who she was talking about. "What I would like to propose," Vanessa concluded, her eyes moving over the other board members with feigned sincere concern, "is that we pause this particular initiative until a more rigorous, more objective selection committee can be established. This is simply a matter of good governance." A heavy silence covered the room. The other board members looked at one another uncertainly. They were good people, but they were intimidated by the influence of Vanessa in the city donor community. Before anyone could speak, Aaliyah stood up. "My name is Aaliyah Carter," she said, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the room. "I am the individual, the personal friend Milliseconds Harrington is so concerned about." She looked directly at Vanessa. "You talk about governance and process, but what you are really doing is trying to punish me because you believe I am not worthy. You look at me and see a night shift janitor, thinking that the work I do every night, scrubbing other people's floors, tells you who I am. But the work a person does to feed a child never defines their ability or their dignity. You see a charity case, not a human being. You do not see a great-granddaughter trying to honor the legacy of a hero." She turned to the other board members. "This scholarship is not only for me. It is for every family that has sacrificed. It is for every child whose parents or grandparents served this country. If we suspend it, bury it under review after review and committee after committee, just because one person disagrees with the first scholarship recipient, that will be an insult to every family like that." Vanessa scoffed. "All of this sounds very moving, Miss Carter, but it does not change the facts. The fact is that you already had a personal relationship with our primary donor. The appearance of that, to put it mildly, is inappropriate. You are right," a deep voice came from the far end of the table. Darius stood up. "Our families really do have a prior relationship. That relationship goes back more than 70 years. He walked to the head of the table, placing a worn leather-bound journal on the polished wooden surface. He opened it to a page that had already been marked. "This is the journal of my great-grandfather," he said to the stunned board members. "Corporal Henry Whitfield, In it, he describes in detail the day his life was saved by a sergeant named Isaiah Carter. His finger moved over the faded line of ink. He wrote here that he was the bravest man I ever knew. I owe him my life, a debt I can never repay. Darius laid out several more photographs and documents. A faded black and white photograph showed a group of young soldiers, his great-grandfather and the great-grandfather of Aaliyah standing beside one another. Military commendations recognized the courage of Sergeant Carter, although he had never received the full recognition he deserved, something not uncommon for many black soldiers of that era. In fact, American history records that, throughout World War I, hundreds of black soldiers carried out extraordinary acts of bravery, but almost none were awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration, even though many had been recommended by their superiors. It was not until 1997, after many decades, that the United States government officially awarded the Medal of Honor to 7 black veterans of that war, of whom only one, Vernon Baker, was still alive to receive the honor in person. The recognition came far too late, but it was an acknowledgement that their courage had never been forgotten, only delayed by the prejudices of the era in which they lived. The Ashworth Opportunity Program is not an act of charity, Darius said, his voice carrying with authority and sincerity. It is a long overdue debt of honor, paid by the Whitfield family to the Carter family. Aaliyah Carter is not the object of my pity. She is the heir to a legacy of courage that my family has a sacred obligation to remember. Anyone who suggests otherwise is insulting the memory of those 2 men. The room fell absolutely silent. The face of Vanessa turned pale, the carefully constructed story she had built collapsing before the powerful truth Darius had just presented. She had attacked with insinuation. Darius answered with history and honor. There was nothing more to say. The board voted unanimously not only to continue the scholarship program, but also to expand it, partnering with the charitable foundation of Darius to make it a lasting pillar of the mission of the center. But Aaliyah, though relieved, still felt that something was incomplete. The battle today had been won with the story of Darius, with the history of his family. She wanted this process to be truly fair, not based only on the honor of one family, but on a transparent system anyone could trust, even when there was no moving story behind it. 1 week after the board meeting, Aaliyah arranged to meet Darius at a small coffee shop near the Ashworth Center, where Maya played in the children's area. I am glad the program is continuing, Aaliyah said, stirring the cup of coffee in front of her. But I keep thinking about what happened. What are you thinking? Darius asked, his gaze attentive. Ems Harrington was wrong about me, Aaliyah said. But she was not completely wrong about one thing. My story was saved because you had a story powerful enough to fight hers. But what if the next participant does not have a special historical connection like mine, is simply deserving but does not have a dramatic enough story to defend themselves? Darius was silent for a moment, realizing she was right about something he had never considered deeply enough. You are right, he finally said. I defended the program with the story of my family. But a truly fair program should not need a moving story to survive. It needs to stand on the strength of its own process. In the months that followed, Darius worked with Evelyn and an independent committee made up of educators, veterans, community finance experts to rebuild the entire governance structure of the program. Selection criteria were published on the center website. Reviewers rotated every year to prevent long-term bias. An independent oversight board, with no one directly connected to the Whitfield family, was established to review every scholarship allocation decision. He also made the full story of the connection between the 2 families public, not to seek praise, but to ensure that no one in the future could use it as a weapon against scholarship recipients. Transparency, he realized, was the best form of protection. Vanessa Harrington quietly resigned from the board 1 week later. No one on the board objected. Aaliyah continued her studies with renewed determination, completing the accounting program at Atlanta Technical College with outstanding results, graduating at the top of her class. She realized that she did not only love numbers, but also loved helping other people find their path. She spent many hours volunteering at the Ashworth Center, guiding new participants, sharing her experience, balancing work, study, and raising a child. When she graduated, she received a job offer from a large accounting firm with a salary 3 times what she had earned as a janitor. But she also received another offer, from Evelyn, the position of scholarship program manager at the Ashworth Center, allowing her to directly help families like the family she had once been. This was her own choice, not something Darius arranged. He only said, "Whichever path you choose, I believe it will be the right one, because it is your choice." After many nights of thought, Aaliyah chose the job at the Ashworth Center. The salary was lower, but the meaning of the work was far greater than any number on a paycheck. She wanted to become the person another Aaliyah, in another supermarket, on another evening, could turn to when she needed an opportunity. 2 years passed. For Aaliyah, everything had changed completely. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Aaliyah and Darius sat on a large blanket spread across Piedmont Park. A few steps away, Nia, now 8 years old, and Maya, 3 years old, played together, their bright laughter ringing across the grass, looking like two real sisters. The relationship between Aaliyah and Darius had developed slowly, naturally over the past 2 years, built not through extravagant romantic gestures, but on a foundation of shared values, respect, and a quiet understanding. He became someone she trusted, someone she considered family. "You know," Aaliyah said, watching Maya chase a butterfly, "I still think about that woman at the supermarket, so lost and so afraid." Darius put an arm around her, pulling her closer. "I think about her too," he said softly, "and about the man who was once so lonely that he forgot what real connection felt like." He looked from the smiling faces of the 2 children to the confident, peaceful woman beside him. "You did not only build a new life for yourself, Aaliyah. You rebuilt my life too. You reminded me what legacy truly means. Not the money left behind, but the lives touched." She turned and smiled at him, a smile containing a love as steady and genuine as the legacy their 2 great-grandfathers had built so many years before. Then, Aaliyah stood up, walked over and sat beside Maya and Nia on the grass. She took a small box from her bag, not a can of formula anymore, but a box of colored pencils, a gift she had bought for both children. She sat between them, drawing together, laughing together. No need for a check, no need for a grand gesture, only the simple, complete presence of a mother giving her full time to the children she loved. That was exactly what this entire journey had taught both of them. That true kindness does not lie in the gift you give, but in whether you truly see another person. That the job a person is doing, whether a night shift janitor or the chairman of a billion-dollar corporation, never defines their value. And for the children you love, no gift, no matter how expensive, can replace genuine presence. The journey had begun with something unexpected, forged through hardship and grace. But here, beneath the warm afternoon sunlight, surrounded by the quiet joy of the family they had built together, Aaliyah knew they were exactly where they had always belonged. It all began with an act of kindness in an ordinary supermarket, a moment proving that a debt of honor never expires, and that the quietest acts of love always echo the loudest across generations. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of the story of Aaliyah and Darius. Aaliyah Carter, Darius Whitfield, the Ashworth Center, all of those names are fictional. But the worry Aaliyah carried in her heart while standing at the checkout counter is not fictional at all. Out there, right now, there are still single mothers who have to count every loose coin before entering a supermarket. There are still night shift janitors who have gone their whole lives without ever truly being seen by anyone. I think about this every time I pass a store at midnight, see fluorescent light falling across the face of someone quietly standing alone. It is very easy for us to look past people like that every day without ever stopping. May someone always see you, no matter what difficult stage of life you are in. And may one day, you be the person who makes someone else feel that they are not invisible. If this story touched you, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you are thinking of. See you in the next story.